it's Melanie White here, back with another video. How are you? I hope you are well. On this channel, we talk all things relationships, dating, leveling up, and just overall being a better you. So today's topic, we're talking about the 6 things I did that was just had me failing when it came to relationships, had me failing when it came to dating. And I'm going to talk about what they were, what I did to overcome. So that way, when you are out there dating, you can kind of avoid those, big mistakes that I made and kind of date with intention, have that clarity and eventually meet your match. All right. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I failed at when I was dating was I was a constant overthinker. Can you relate? I mean, I would make up stories in my head. I would always think worst case scenario, this guy is gonna play me, this guy is gonna do this guy is gonna do that. I probably think, he's probably this, he's probably that, blah, 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 blah. And, this was even like before the date or after a first date. And the thing is that when you overthink, right, you're not present on your dates. You're not present in your relationships, right? Because you're thinking, he's going to say this or he's going to do that, or he's thinking this or he's going to do that. And I remember, who's that? Oh my gosh, what's his name? Matthew Hussey. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I remember he said one thing and it struck a chord with me. And he said that if you are hysterical in your relationships, that means it's historical. And when he said that, I was just like, boom, like he's right about that, right? Because when I was thinking, when I was just hysterical in dating and just dramatizing everything, if I look back, it was historical. It was me living in the past. It was me thinking about my past dating mistakes, right? It was me thinking about, my beliefs, right? My old beliefs about men are no good, men are this, men are that, right? So what I had to do is I had to actually like calm my mind and kind of reprogram it. How did I do that? Meditation. Meditation is like the gateway to your soul. Started meditating. There's so many apps out there. I know at the time, I don't even remember what app I used back then. It was probably like maybe 10 years ago. But I know the one that I use now is Insight Timer. It's free and there's thousands and thousands of apps, of meditations. And I know that really, really quieted my mind. And again, when you're not overthinking, you become present, right? And automatically when you're present and you're in front of somebody on a date, right, you can actually like connect with them. You can actually like get to know them versus just being in your head. So if you are overthinking, trust me, I get it. But you gotta calm your mind. You gotta calm your mind and just be in the present moment. So the second thing that I was doing, is I was auditioning. Okay. So instead of me vetting this guy and observing, I was auditioning. Like if you saw me on dates, right, you would think that I'm in a job interview, right? I remember I would be on these dates and, you have that nervousness, just talking. Like I would just talk and talk and talk and overshare and right? Because when you're oversharing, that opens you up to someone taking advantage of you, right? To a guy being like, so she's this, and this, and this, and, maybe I can get this, and this, and this, and this, right? So you don't want to overshare. Of course, yes, you want to share, right? Because there's a mutual exchange. You guys are on a date. You're getting to know one another, but you don't want to overshare too much, right? And you really want to observe, right? Instead of auditioning, you're not on stage. Okay. This is not Broadway. You're not on stage. Okay. If anything, he's on stage, he's auditioning, and you're observing, right? Because this is going to be your forever person. This is going to be the person that you're planning to spend the rest of your life with. You got to know what you're dealing with, right? Before you say I do. So you definitely have to, you know, kind of zip it up. Okay. That's what I had to do. I kind of had to zip it up, observe, vet, ask the right questions to get to know this guy, get to know who you're really dealing with, right? Because in the beginning, it's all a front, right? I'm on my best behavior. He's on his best behavior, right? And your task, your job is to figure this guy out. Okay. So no more auditioning. Okay. I did it for years and it doesn't work. I'm telling you, it does not work. Okay. Observe and vet. Always. The third thing I did, okay, and I know some women are going to be like, oh, Melanie, no, I can't. And what the third thing was I lacked the self-esteem. I lacked the confidence to let men know that I was interested in them and approach them. Okay. Now I know you're going to say, Melanie, I'm not approaching no man. Like the guy has to chase me. And yes, you are right. The guy does need to pursue you, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with letting him know that you're interested, right? Um, you know, I would always, before when I was, lacking the confidence and all of that, I would see a guy I liked, but I would never let him know. Right. Or, I would be out somewhere, maybe I'm at a Starbucks or something. And, you see a guy you really like. And then I'd put my head down and I would be on my phone. Right. But when you kind of have that self-esteem and that confidence, right, you can look at him, right, and you can smile. That was one thing that when I think back, because I had RBF, I had resting face, right? I people were like, Melanie, you're mean mugging. Like, you need to smile. Like, you don't look approachable. Like, you look like you're gonna curse me out, right? Like, that is the feedback that I used to get. So I was like, okay, I'm going to smile. And it's true. When you do smile, people are so much more approachable. People are so more inviting and willing to talk to you. And I'm not saying you gotta, walk around like, right? Because then that's kind of weird. But even if you're just kind of neutral, or if you see someone and you have like a friendly smile, that changes things, right? Because then that lets him feel safe. That lets him feel safe enough to approach you. Because these days, you know, there's a lot of men that don't want to approach anymore, right? They're afraid of rejection, which I completely understand, right? Like, I don't want to be rejected either. Like, right? Depending on the setting you're in, if you're in a workplace setting, he's not going to necessarily approach because, with the workplace, it's, Me Too movement and, the girl may, you know, go to HR. You know what I'm trying to say, right? So, there's nothing wrong with letting a man know that you're interested, like, I remember as I started, when I was on my journey, I would, what did I used to do? I remember one time I was out and I like bumped a guy. Like, I remember I deliberately like walked into him and bumped him and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Da, 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 da. I wasn't sorry, but I was in front of his face. And he felt comfortable enough to take over and pursue. And he did, he was like, what's your name? Da 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 da. We started talking, there was a joke, da 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 da. And then, I remember our first date, he's like, hey, Miss Clumsy, or hey, Miss, I like to bump into people, like, and it was a way to connect, right? So, I remember even there was another time, what did I do? I think I was in the grocery store and I saw a guy I liked. And I remember we were in the frozen aisle, and I remember he was walking down the aisle, and I was like, "Hi," and he was like, "Hi," And I was like, can you reach up there and get me the frozen carrots? And I was like, yeah, I was like, I got a height problem. Like, I'm only like 5'4", and, he kind of chuckled and he was like, yeah, sure. And, he went and he got the carrots for me and I was like, okay, cool. And, we kind of had like a little chuckle or whatever. He didn't really approach after that, but again, I was in his face. And so if he was interested, then that would have given him the opportunity to say, hey, what's your name? Or, do you normally shop here? Or, is there a good shopping? Like, I would just always, have that friendliness, right? Have that friendliness and be friendly, right? If he's not interested, it's okay, right? It's okay if he's not interested. Maybe he's married, maybe he has a girlfriend, or maybe he's going through whatever, right? And not take things personally, right? Because remember, you're just looking for one, right? And if you exist, he exists. So don't be afraid to approach. Okay. The fourth reason why I absolutely failed at dating was I didn't understand men. Like, clueless about men. I thought men were like women. I don't even know why I thought like that. But one thing you need to realize is that men are different. They think different, they operate different, they date different, they are just different. And I had to learn that. And again, all the resources are out there, all the books are out there. When I think back to my journey, maybe you've heard of Tony Gaskins, but I remember reading some of his books, and he's got a huge YouTube following as well. But he really let me see how a man thinks, and his teachings were super helpful while I was dating. And yes, you kind of need to understand men, because once you understand men, dating is so much easier. It really is. So I would encourage you to, even listen to like a podcast or something, but get to understand men, because they are different, and they're simpler. They're much more simpler than women when you start to learn about men. But learn about men. So the fifth thing that just had me just not winning in these dating streets, okay, like just failing miserably, was I had this mindset of I wanted the man to want me. I wanted the man to be obsessed with me, right? And instead of me wanting the man to want me, what I should have been asking myself is, how do I feel about this man? How do I feel about myself when I'm with this man? How does this man treat me? Right? Because if you're just focused on people pleasing and him liking you, right? What about you? Right? What about how you feel? And remember, if this is like the man you're going to marry, you have to, again, like when I said before, you've got to observe and really get to know who you're dealing with, right? Um, and so I had to shift that mindset to, how do I feel when I'm with this guy? When I'm on a date, do I feel cherished? Do I feel loved? Do we share the same core values, right? I stopped thinking about, is this guy, you know, obsessed with me? And instead I had to ask those questions, like, how do I feel? I had to check in with myself, right? And it was not necessarily, okay, I need to be obsessed with him, but are we aligned? And is there even a connection? Right? Like, there may not even be a connection, but I want this guy to want me. That doesn't make sense. So really kind of take a step back, right? Anytime you're dating, and check in with yourself. Like, how do I feel? Do I trust myself when I'm in this man? Do I feel pressured when I'm with this man? Do I put on a mask when I'm with this man? Can I really be myself when I'm with this man? Is there a connection? I think I already said that before, but you kind of have to ask those kind of deep questions, instead of the surface level. Oh my God, he's gonna want me. He's gonna be obsessed with me, right? So, um, yeah, that was the fifth mistake. And once you shift that to how do I feel, and or once you shift that to how do I feel, that's when all the change happens. At least and I would say this one really turned off men. Like I remember men telling me, um, like I remember men telling me, girl, like that's such a turn off. And that was, I did not know what I wanted. And I really did not know what I wanted. Here I was, 30 something, and didn't know what I wanted. I thought I knew what I wanted, right? Like I listened to what my parents said I should want in a man. I listened to my friends. I listened to my family. I listened to, social media. But I had to stop and think, like, what do I really want in a man? Like, for example, right? Like everyone's like, I want this guy who makes, $500,000 a year, right? But what comes with someone who makes $500,000 a year? Maybe that's a man who's really busy. Maybe that's a man who's always traveling, right? And maybe you work a 9 to 5, right? And, you're done work and you want to spend time with your special someone, but he's too busy working. So sometimes you have to ask yourself those really critical questions like, okay, everyone says I should, have this man who makes like $1 trillion a year, but do I need that? Like, do I really need that? Right. And so I had to get pen and paper. And I know it sounds corny, but really make a love list. I'm going to do a video about it, but make a love list, and you may not know what you want, right? But what I would do is start with what you don't want, right? So maybe you've been on some dates, right? Some dates that were not very fun. And maybe start with that, what you don't want in a man, right? And then look at the opposite, right? Because the opposite is what you do want in a man, right? Um, but really, how do you get to know what you want? You gotta date. You do. You gotta date, and that's how you figure out what you want in a man, right? So again, don't be afraid to go on dates and experiment and get to know men. Um, because yes, you will see what you like and what you don't like. Get it out of your head. Get it on paper, because once you kind of have that clarity, right? That's when your mind, that's when more thoughts will come in, right? Like more of what you want, right? And that's why journaling is so powerful. Everyone talks about it, but it really does work, right? It does work, because once you get it on paper, you're like, oh, I never thought of this before, but now it's there because there's space, because you got it out of your head and it's on paper. And so again, make that love list and figure out what you want. So those were my 6 dating failures. I'd like to know, what are yours, or if there's anything that you're struggling with that you're dating life now. Let me know. I love to hear in the comments. So I hope this video was helpful. This is Melanie White, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye.